Hey, so I guess we're gonna be doing a reaction video. It's for Mr.Din. I haven't actually done a YouTube video in a long time, but I figured it's a beat 'em up related thing, so why not talk about it? We're gonna be looking at Aria Talks, beat 'em ups. I was actually there for the stream, and I had my own thoughts at the time, but I figured why not just go through the video, and kind of make some points on this. Shout out to Aria. I like her awesome River City Girls videos and stuff and her tutorials and whatnot. So good to see another beat 'em up fan talking about this kind of stuff. Let's get into
Floating through all my stuff. I get done watching a triple jump video, and I look and I've got a comment on one of my videos. A comment on one of my River City Girls tutorials. In Streets of Rage 4, when I knock down a group of enemies, I can time my meaty to hit them on the first frame and they get up off the floor, excluding certain enemies that have an invincible wake up, such as Z, Barbon, etc. In River City Girls, this doesn't seem to work at all. Every enemy in the game has wake up invincibility, as far as I can tell, and so much HP that you have to knock down even the basic guys 3 or 4 times before they die. I don't understand at all, and it's really frustrating. It makes all the enemies take forever to KO. Hibari, for instance, I have to open up around 15 times. It's so tedious. Not a beat 'em up scrub either, because I've gotten S ranks in Streets of Rage 4 Mania. But I've never played a River City, and clearly I'm missing something because I don't understand how this game works. That's the comment. That's what got my brain going in circles about this. In my response, I say to them, yeah, the River City games have never been done that way. There are plenty of other beat 'em ups as well that give enemies leniency, how you can act around them when they wake up as well, but it just means that you have to apply a little patience in your approach, which isn't a bad thing. That aside, if you're finding enemies to be tedious to fight because they have more health, use the money you earn to buy food items. It raises your stats, which you can see in the pause menu, so you'll be able to hit harder, move faster, etc. These are RPG elements that have been present since early River City games. In short,
it. Actually, okay, so I wanna pause it here because I do agree with her on the fact that like you want to approach games differently within the genre. Um, but speaking about River City Girls specifically, I'm not going to talk about the River City series because the most I really know about River City is the original game on the NES and Underground. But my issue with River City Girls and the River City Girls 2 is that you're essentially like the level up system isn't done as well as I think it should be done. And I think that is the issue that is plaguing a lot of people who play the game, regardless of if they're familiar with the series or not. Um, the thing that I've always criticized about like Street Race 3, for example, is that beat 'em ups are meant to make you feel like you have power over your enemies. Like their advantage is that there's multiple of them against you. So ideally, in a one-on-one fight, you should be able to destroy them. Um, Now, jumping outside of beat 'em ups for a second, if we looked at something like Metroid or other games that have power-ups and upgrades and stuff like that, those games give you like enemies at the beginning that you destroy in like one hit or two hits or whatever. You're not struggling against these enemies, even though you have like a limited move set compared to like the end game, right? Uh, but the thing about Metroid is that you have the option sometimes to go into these areas and stuff that are more dangerous to you with more dangerous enemies. Sometimes environments that can actually kill you in some senses or whatever. River City's Girls problem, and this is the problem with both games that I've noticed when I play them. I beat the first game, I still have beat the second game because of some gripes that I have. But the thing that I notice about these games is that right off the jump, you're fighting enemies that could just beat the crap out of you, and you have nothing, like you have very little to fight back with. River City Girls 2 does a little bit better with this, but it's still a problem. Like you don't even have access to like your secondary attack until a certain point, or basic mechanics and stuff, which is fine. That would be fine if the enemies at the beginning were easier enemies, that, to kind of ease you into the game, and then maybe you come across a tougher enemy here and there. You see, oh, okay, I need to upgrade my character, if I'm gonna stand a chance against this guy, you know. And River City Girls has that problem, but I just wanted to chime in on that because I you know, Aria makes really great tutorials for these games and the characters and stuff, and I watch the tutorials. But the thing about those tutorials is that, well, you can't do a lot of that stuff until later in the game when you've unlocked those moves, So it's a problem of accessibility. It's not so much the skill level thing, but I'll let her continue.
For it, River City Girls isn't meant to be played like Streets of Rage. It's a completely different beast, so use a different approach. I'd like to note, this was noted, like they were saying all this, on the tutorial that I made for the first game, actually goes into detail about the fact that you can buy food items to increase your stats. If this person didn't know this, which clearly they didn't seem to, had they simply watched the video, they might have figured something out that, would have helped them. Sometimes you just get locked into a particular approach and you just filter out everything the game and the others are trying to teach you about how to play the game you're currently playing. Because game B doesn't do the thing, so why is this game doing the thing? Right.
Okay, so again, this is where I can only halfway agree, because again, I agree with the idea that, like, if you're going into a game, you need to learn that game, but here's where the issue of accessibility comes into play. Not everybody has access to her videos, unfortunately. And the game itself doesn't do a very good job of teaching you any of this stuff. Like, let's just be real. There's, I believe there are instances where the game will tell you some of this stuff. But from what I recall playing, like, you jump into this and it just assumes that that the food, and honestly, I don't think there's anything in the game that tells you that the food upgrades your stats. Like, you go into the store and they'll probably say it on the side, like it boosts your stats or whatever. You'll see it after you buy the food, right? And it's only after you buy it the first time. I think after that, if you buy it anymore, it doesn't upgrade your stats. So you have to buy all the food and stuff like that. But the thing is, people aren't necessarily going to pay attention to that. Now, I'll even give you another example of this too. The Yakuza series, right? When you start off in Yakuza, your moveset is pretty limited and stuff. But here's the thing about Yakuza. When I first played Yakuza, the stuff that they gave you was enough to destroy a regular average enemy, right? And when it got to a point where I was fighting tougher enemies, that's where I was, okay, I gotta go to the store to buy food if I want to, if I'm gonna heal myself, right? And it's been a long time. I haven't played the first Yakuza in years, probably a decade now. I recall there being actual, like, tutorials that told you, hey, this upgrades your stats. And then there's also a skill tree that you can look at. I think it's in the first game, I'm not sure. But either way, like, there's something there to tell the player, like, this is what this does. If you want to upgrade Kiryu, this is what you got to do. Like, it's in the game. You don't have to go and watch somebody else's video to see that. And this is the problem with River City Girls, right? And like I said, I absolutely agree with her that people shouldn't jump into this just because they're good at Street Rage 4, thinking that they're going to be good at River City Girls. That, like, I'll get into the skill transfer things. I know you can talk more about that, Because there is a certain thing with skill transfer that I kind of disagree with, but I'll talk about that later. But again, just wanted to go into like that, like the River City Girls is particularly a game that to me doesn't do that system very well, and it doesn't explain it to the player very well either.
That's part of what made me want to like talk about beat 'em ups, right? Just in general, because their mindset was, I'm really good at Streets of Rage 4, thus I shouldn't be getting my head kicked in here. I've talked about this like multiple times over the years with multiple people. I have this problem when it comes to beat 'em ups and like people's general mindsets about them, how they approach them. Final Fight, Streets of Rage shaped a lot of things in regards to how people approach beat 'em ups and beat 'em up design. Like people that get into making games with the express purpose of wanting to make beat 'em ups tend to model a lot of things after what those games did. And it's understandable. Those games were, back in their time, the benchmark for what beat 'em ups like should be. Streets of Rage 2 stepped things forward a lot for beat 'em ups. A friend of mine saying that they pretty much have like a benchmark where if insert beat 'em up is not at least as good as Streets of Rage 2, then they're probably not doing it right. I have my issues with that as a concept, but we'll get into that.
Okay, so I agree with her here. This is, and it's actually less Streets of Rage 2 and more Streets of Rage 4. This is like people in this genre get snobby about stuff. I've noticed this mostly after Streets of Rage 4 came out, but it is a thing that has been a thing for a while. But it wasn't so much Streets 2 because you always like I remember back in the day, because I'm old, whenever the discussion of Final Fight and Streets of Rage would ever pop up, people would always say that Streets of Rage was a ripoff of Final Fight. And it's funny that they say that when I personally feel Streets of Rage did the formula better than Final Fight. Especially if you look at it as a series, like Final Fight 2 did nothing new at all compared to the old Final Fight. In fact, made things effectively worse, despite having new characters, having new enemies, new backgrounds, and stuff like that. I like Final Fight 2, but it doesn't really do anything different from Final Fight. In fact, in Final Fight itself is just a better game by comparison. The arcade version, that is, not the SNES version. And then Final Fight 3 finally, and no pun intended, added new mechanics, and then that was just the kind of the end of the series, because Streetwise is not a 2D beat 'em up, and it wasn't made in the 90s at the time, so 3 was kind of the end of the series, and that's really the only game I would say in a series that really competes with the Streets of Rage series. Like, outside of Streets of Rage 1. I mean, I wouldn't say Final Fight, but, that like I said, the snobby thing always pops up where it's like, if it's not insert game, or if it doesn't play like this game or whatever, it's not good. And that's always been a thing. I've never held that view. This is why, like, my skill of reviewing things is different from other people. It's actually why I don't do reviews, because a lot of times it'll take me a minute to get into a game, understand its mechanics, and my thought process will completely change from there. Raging Justice is a good example. Most people will look at that game, and again, because it's not the conventional beat 'em up, and it doesn't do fancy stuff or whatever, they're not going to really be into it. But what's funny is that, like, there's a game, Mayhem Brawler, for example. That game was a bit rough on its release, and people who liked Streets of Rage 4 were kind of dunking on it because of such things. And when it got the update, some of them came over and started playing it. And they, of course, they still think Street 4 is better. Why not? It's what more characters in Street 4, among other things. But they missed the fact that Street Rage 4 itself was a rough on release, and that it didn't get to the point that it is now, where they do like it until some updates. But that being said, like, people have a bias. Like, whenever there's a game that comes out that is top of the line, it hits the right bells for a lot of people. People stick to that, and they expect the rest of the genre to play that way. And the problem with beat 'em ups is that, well, long before Street Rage 4, we had great beat 'em ups, but that just comes with the territory, honestly. Like, when you have a new, when you have a new fan base coming into the genre, they're gonna look at the newest and greatest thing and compare everything to that. It's just gonna happen. But I agree with her. Like, like, beat 'em ups have always played differently from each other. Every game is different. You have to learn the quirks in it and stuff. But I want to hear what she has to say about the skill transfer thing.
Everything Final Fight, Streets of Rage, Double Dragon is another. For everything that these games did for beat 'em ups, they are also very basic in their general approach. You don't have to go out of your way to understand a whole lot, but that doesn't mean that those games can't be optimized. You can sit there and pick a game apart in so many ways. How much damage certain things do to enemies, how enemies move, how they react. Anybody who's played Streets of Rage can tell you, jumping at a Donovan enemy is like tantamount to you bashing your head against the wall. That is why I call him He Who Splits the Sky. If you're in the stages of making a beat 'em up and you are doing things that don't line up with what these particular games do to, the friend that I mentioned before, you're not hitting the benchmark. But that's strange to me, because you have to consider that every beat 'em up is made differently. For example, Donovan has a natural reaction to people trying to jump near. There are other enemies in Streets of Rage 2 that have reactions to you doing very specific actions. By the same token, if we look at Final Fight, enemies in Final Fight don't tend to do that same thing. Rather, enemies in Final Fight are programmed to move a certain way based on what you're doing. If you knock them down, they'll probably have invo when they get up, but in general, they don't have like hard-coded reactions to you doing very specific things unless it's an extremely specific enemy. And that's something that sets Final Fight and Streets of Rage apart. You're not going to jump at enemies in Final Fight and get, anti-aired for your problems like 90% of the time. You may run into a singular enemy, usually a boss, that will do that kind of thing to you. But outside of that, yeah, you're free to jump at any enemy in the game and kick them in the face and then just kind of deal. So
that's a good point to bring up. As I said, reacting a little bit earlier, that these games are all made differently and you have to approach them differently. But I think the thing that's being missed here, though, is that, and this is not coming from people who only play Street Rage 4 and got good at 4 and whatever. There's people that have played beat 'em ups for years, like myself, where there's like a general skill that you have when you're playing these games. I think it's the same thing with fighting games. I'm not really good at fighting games, but there's general skills that you can kind of transfer between beat 'em ups. Utilizing the Z-axis, crowd control, kind of testing out an enemy and seeing what they do, if they have an anti-air or these kind of things. Even within Streets of Rage series itself, the games are very different. Donnie doesn't exist in Street Rage 1, so you can just jump kick anybody. Nobody has an anti-air in Street 1 except, I believe, Souther. Souther's about the only guy that does. I guess you can say Bongo does too. I mean, he breathes fire and he can knock you out of the air with that. But, like, for the most part, you're not really dealing with any anti-airs. Streets Rage 2, Donnie it's actually funny she brings up Donnie, because Donnie, for the most part, I think only Streets of Rage 3, um, and certain Donnies in 4, you actually absolutely cannot jump at. They will anti-air you. But Bare Knuckle 3, Streets of Rage 2, lower versions of Donnie and 4, if you're careful enough and you know what attacks can counter their uppercut, you can pretty much get a jump in on them. But there's differences there as well. Like Streets of Rage 2, the reason it is like that is because most enemies in that game can anti-air you. Bosses and goons included. You have kickboxers, you have Electra can anti-air you. Who else? I'm drawing a blank here. I know there's like one more enemy that can anti-air you in the game, but the ninjas can anti-air you if they have a sword on them. So, outside of the bosses, of course, you have Barbin, Bear, all that stuff. So there is a bit of a skill transfer even within Streets of Rage games, where it's like, okay, you kind of have to adjust and realize, okay, well, Streets 3, there really isn't any enemies that anti-air you outside of Donnie and maybe some bosses in 3. So it's more like, oh, don't jump at Donnie specifically. In that version of the game, Bare Knuckle, you can jump at him fine, he won't uppercut you. But yeah, like, I get what you're saying. Like, it's a good point to make that, like, even within these games, when you have a general skill, like, there's these smaller aspects, stuff that you have to remember and adjust to. But I still think River City Girls fundamentally goes against some things that it probably shouldn't. And I think that is the problem. Now, I don't know about her friend. Like I said, her friend is probably just coming off Streets of Rage 4 and thinks that River City Girls should play like that. I never jumped into River City Girls thinking that way. I already knew I was jumping in and playing with the limited moveset at the beginning and stuff like that, but there's still certain aspects that I think would have done the game justice and probably would have been more open to people who are new to the game. There's just, as I mentioned earlier, there's just stuff that it does that I think it could be done better and has been done better by other games.
Was another confusing part of the statement for me. It's not like it's not a thing in Streets of Rage, because it is. It 100% is. Even some of the base enemies will 100% like wake up and just punch you in the face if you try to like stand over them. To have that said, I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't apply across the board, so that's weird to me. Now, this next section didn't happen on stream, but these are things that I'd like to additionally touch on, so I've recorded it after and we're doing it now. Another thing that I'd like to touch on is the concept of overlap with fighting games and other genres. The thing that brought this up was an interesting tweet that I saw from a friend of mine, Din the Aberry, who's done a lot for the beat-em-up community, to say the least, and is in the process of making his own game even. In his tweet, he says that beat-em-ups don't need a bunch of fighting game mechanics in order to be good. And, I actually agree with that. Like I said before, we simply wouldn't be where we are today with beat-em-ups if it wasn't for older games that we've gotten. Many of these older games didn't have crazy things like juggles, ground bounces, wall bounces, and so on, but they managed to have depth and to have that it factor in its gameplay that pulled us all in to begin with. It's why games like Turtles in Time are looked at with so much reverence. That said, I'm also of the opinion that having those kinds of mechanics does make beat-em-ups better. If you make a beat-em-up that at its base level is fun and intuitive, and you can add on other mechanics that come from fighting games and it's done well, it can only improve your overall experience, because it can spark that part of your brain that says, oh dang, this is really cool. I wonder what else I can do. And here's the fun thing to think about when considering overlap from other things. Fighting games aren't the only genres that beat-em-ups pull from when you really sit and think about it. when you play a shmup and you're in a pinch, you oftentimes have a bomb on hand, a weapon that clears.
Actually, before she gets into this, so I didn't know. I actually didn't even know I got mentioned in the video because I had only watched the stream, so I only seen the stream portion of it. So to expand on the point that I made on Twitter, because Twitter limited characters, you can only say so much. So I made a general statement that fighting games, mechanics from fighting games, isn't the thing that you need to make a beat 'em up good. I would actually say that I even disagree in the fact that it makes them better. It's and the reason I say that is because you can go back and you can play so many of the classic games that don't have these things in them. And some would say those are even better than what we have offered today because they're just really good at what they do when it comes down to crowd control, when it comes down to set pieces and stuff like that. I'd love to actually make a video that goes into detail about this kind of stuff because I've made tweets about it and people kind of like it. It's cool. I'm glad people enjoy those tweets. But there's so many aspects to beat 'em ups that I feel are being short-sighted because of the fact that you're getting ground bounces and combos and stuff like that and whatever. And those things may feel good. I'm not disagreeing there. I think if you can do it very well, it's a great thing. But the thing that I've noticed, and honestly, this is even in Streets of Rage 4, the thing that I've noticed is that in these games, the AI is kind of dumb. For example, they'll catch you on something here and there, but it's if you stand still, they don't attack you. They don't come at you this. Something I saw in Streets of Rage 4. I've seen in Mayhem Brawler. I've seen in a number of recent games. These enemies don't even come at you, and that's crazy to me. But nobody's ever gonna notice that because when you're playing a beat 'em up, you're always moving, you're always attacking, right? But in a game like Streets of Rage 2, and the reason why I hold it to such high regard is that there is always something going on the screen, right? When it comes down to set pieces, Stage 2 has bikers flying in from everywhere. Stage 3, it's got the alien house, and you're fighting an animatronic thing, and it's always some crazy stuff that's going on in Streets 2. But to top it off, even on Stage 1, if you're playing on Mania, for example, enemies start aggressing on you, they're on top of you all times. There's not a moment where you're just standing there and they're just looking at you. And that's something that's even in Streets of Rage 4. I guess to speak on River City Girls, because it was part of the topic. I think River City Girls actually does that right. An enemy comes on screen, they're ready to fight you. They're not playing around. They're gonna fight you, and I think River City Girls does set pieces well too. Honestly, I think if they had just fixed up the upgrade system, I'd be much more into that game. But yeah, just to expand on that, the fighting mechanics. When I say that fighting game mechanics are not needed to make a good beat 'em up, what I'm particularly talking about is that we need to go back and look at the classic games that didn't have all the stuff, where your movesets were limited, and what is it that they did with those games that kind of hit that dopamine effect? That oh wow, this is cool to do within that limited moveset, right? Part of it was the enemy AI was very aggressive, and and tough in crowds and stuff like that, and all the things that were going on. Even Final Fight does this pretty well. The Final Fight keeps the pressure on you within those games, and funny enough, even in the SNES games where there's 3 enemies on screen, it's still tense because these enemies are tough, and they're gonna fight you. They're not gonna just stand around and do nothing on harder difficulties and stuff. So that's what I'm just talking about as far as fighting game mechanics and stuff not being needed for beat 'em ups to be good or even made better. We don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel. But I agree with her that in the instance that we have both aspects, the things that made the classic games good and adding on the fancier things like the combos, the ground bounces, the wall bounces, the defense mechanics and stuff like that. You start adding those things on to the fact that we have these aggressive enemies and stuff like that. I think that makes for a much better beat 'em up. And I mean, there's a lot of things I could talk about for days. So I'm just gonna let her continue.
The screen gives you room to breathe, and in most cases gives you invulnerability frames so that you can take a second to process what's going on around you without threat. But it takes a resource. In beat 'em ups, as far back as Final Fight and Streets of Rage, there are those games again, you have special moves that are made to knock surrounding enemies away from you. They can be screen clears like the police car in Streets of Rage, but not always. And whether they are or not, they typically have invulnerability, so you're given room to breathe and process without threat. Interesting, right? This concept of overlap goes into other games and other genres too, so if anyone, who gives this a listen can think of anything, feel free to comment about it below. I'd actually love to hear what you think on it. Anyway, that's it from me.
So just to add on to her point too about invulnerability, this is a thing that a lot of beat 'em ups miss, by the way. And actually, it's kind of strange because the River City Girls actually has this problem too. So River City Girls, you don't have a mega crash, right? That's not a problem within itself. You can block. You have other means of stuff, right? The issue is, and I've noticed this in River City Girls. I don't know if it's in the second game. It might be. The enemy sticks to you like a magnet when they attack. Like I don't know if anybody's ever noticed this, but next time you play the first River City game, and maybe the second one too, try to see if this happens. When an enemy goes to attack you, somehow they just start, like you could be standing right here, and they'll attack you, and somehow they move up to where you are while they're attacking, right? And you can't stop them while they're attacking. They're invincible while they're attacking. That's the first game. I don't know about the second game. They may fix that. That is one of the big things that was really frustrating to me in the first River City Girls game. Now I don't know if that changes as you upgrade your character, because I think when you upgrade your character stats, stuff like that changes. But this is where it gets into the point that they don't explain any of this stuff to you. Like if we have a menu in there that said, hey, when you upgrade agility, you move faster, you move smoother, this and that, whatever. When you upgrade strength, you do more power, obviously, right? If you upgrade defense, your defense stuff is better. I think luck. I think it was luck or something. It was luck or something else. It changes your ability to attack. I think it changes your ability to actually attack enemies that are invulnerable to you while they're attacking. I'm not entirely sure. I have to go back and play. I haven't played in a long time. But if those things are fixed, necessarily speaking, right, when the character is upgraded, then that needs to be told to the player, right, in some way, shape, or form. Because I'm not against skill trees. I'm not against upgrade systems, right? What if I had a choice between the two? I'd probably go with a more classic approach. But I'm not against skill tree. I'm not against RPG mechanics. The problem is if you're going to have those things, the player needs to know. They need to know how that stuff is, and it can't just be from a video. Like Aria's videos are great, and I'm glad she makes them. I hope she makes more. I hope she makes more on other games. But if I have to go to a YouTube video to explain these things to me, that is bad design. It's just bad design, period. Things shouldn't be like that. Maybe we're like that back in the 90s and late 80s and stuff, but it just shouldn't be like that now. We have too many ways to access information in games nowadays to not at least have some kind of tutorial stashed away somewhere, or even better, just show us in the game. But again, I'd have to go back and play it. I recall not having this information. This is something I had to figure out on my own while playing the game. But yeah, this is a good video. I I enjoyed this video. I watched the stream, so I saw the whole thing, but the little part at the end was great. Just adjusting my tweet. I got other tweets and stuff too. I guess I don't know if people are interested in hearing me talk about that on the channel. I can do that. But yeah, great video, Aria. Yeah, I do agree with you on some points, disagree on others. I again like she understands Rip City Girls more than I do, so I could be missing something. If she'd like to correct that, that's fine. But from my experience, it's not so much the skill transfer issue, uh, because I do think there are some things that River City Girls does that could lend itself better if they followed uh things from the game. For example, again, if that whole like enemies magnetizing to you when they attack kind of thing, for example. Like I've seen it happen in the original game, and it always pissed me off. Stuff like that, like, like, why? Why does that happen? You know, why is my character like extremely weak to a point where I don't even have access to a certain button? When these enemies are already as strong, like stronger than me in that instance, like it's like I said, if I bring up Metroid, for example, at the very beginning of the levels, you're not dealing with the higher tier enemies. You're dealing with like very easy enemies to kind of get your feet in the ground and learn like what's going on here, right? And then eventually you progress and you get an upgrade and it shows you, oh, you got an upgrade, you upgraded to the missile, right? And then there's some things that that you maybe walked past and saw, oh, I can use a missile on this now, right? It's a good feeling to have when you get an upgrade. Whereas River City Girls, and this is actually another issue I want to talk about too. Maybe I'll do a full video on River City Girls in general. Some of the upgrades actually screw you over, especially in the first game. If you upgrade your full combo, you get screwed against bosses because bosses block or counter after 3 attacks. So you have 5, and it takes 5 to knock them down or launch them or whatever. I think they fixed this in the second game though. But again, there's stuff like that that are going to deter people who are generally good at beat 'em ups, because it's like, dude, if I get an upgrade, that should benefit me, not screw me over, right? So yeah, I think it's more. I can't speak for a friend, but I think in general, it's more that these typical beat 'em up conventions could have lended itself better to the game itself, alongside them doing something better with the upgrades and stuff like that. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that react. Aria, thank you for the video, thank you for tagging me. Keep up the good work. Hope to see more from you. Anyways, yeah, if you like that, I'll probably do some more reacts. I know Major Players has a couple of videos that I want to react to. He talks about some really cool topics regarding beat 'em up, so if you want to see that, let me know. I'll react to that. Anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Peace. Post video note, guys. Yeah, I'm sorry about the audio. I'm still adjusting to actually doing these recordings. I guess there was an issue with my mic. As you can hear here, I actually fixed it. So my next reaction will probably be better. Also, I noticed that Aria's video audio changed up in the middle of the video as well. That's because I hooked up my earbuds while I was watching the video, and I guess when it's on the earbuds, the audio lowers a bit. So again, sorry about that. Next time I'm going to do some test recording first to make sure the audio is good. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll catch you next time.